maybe this isn't the most wise, but like I'll dump all of my savings, all of my everything, like as if this is the last thing I'm gonna make.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cut to Reveal, the podcast where we talk about the editing art form and all the hurdles of that career path. I'm Ricky, and as always, I'm with Peter.
Hey everyone.
So today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're still going to be talking about editing and all that great stuff, but we're going to have more. This episode will be more of like a general filmmaking episode with Thomas Percy Kim.
Yeah, and Thomas is a writer-director. He's working with Jim Cummings on his next film, which will be his first feature film titled Isle Child. And he's running a WeFunder campaign to raise budget for it. So that's one of the things we talk about in this episode. But in general, he's a very accomplished filmmaker, being so young. His latest short film won San Francisco Film Festival, which qualifies it for 2023 Oscars. How cool is that?
Yeah, and he hasn't even finished film school yet. So he's already well on his way to be a great director and filmmaker.
I'm jealous of him. Like, he has found his calling so early. Lucky guy, lucky guy.
So let's get into it. Here we are with Thomas Percy Kim.
I have so much respect for editors because it's so hard for me. It's like, I think it's one of the least, things that come easily just because, it requires such a different mindset than the way I'm used to. Yeah. So like you guys make the films. Huge props.
Awesome. What area are you most comfortable with? Like, is it directing? Is it writing? Which one is like the one that you would like define as your main thing?
Yeah, I think it's directing first and foremost. Writing is just a byproduct of that because, I don't have access to top level Hollywood scripts or whatnot, and I'm still trying to find a co-writer or someone who I can, share the script with. And so usually the reason I write is to get to the final product, right? And so it's directing is writing is a way to get to directing for me. And I think I'm hopefully a jack of all trades, master of none. Like I'm so curious about the world. I love everything. And I think one of the greatest things about filmmaking for me is just I get to dive into so many facets of life, whether it's psychology or anthropology or obviously human behavior and dealing with actors, or whether it's being technical and learning all the craft and the with the cameras and all the technical stuff and editing as well, computers. So I love everything, and I think that's why filmmaking fits so well for me. Just because I have I'm not an expert on anything, but I'm very interested in a lot of things.
Yeah. I think I actually heard the term specialized generalist or something like that, where you're jack of all trades, but at the same time there are you play very high game on a few cylinders.
I think that being that jack of all trades is really helps you as a director. I think great directors, at least even if they're not masters of everything, as long as they have the understanding that they do of the entire workflow, so to speak, of creating the film. So everything that is puts you head and shoulders above a lot of other directors and filmmakers.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, can you just give us a short story about how you got involved in filmmaking? And also because we'll base a few of the following questions on your short film. So if you can briefly talk about how it came to be as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in this town called Concord, Massachusetts. If you know anything about Massachusetts, or not Massachusetts, but Concord, Massachusetts, it's becoming more diverse. But when I was growing up, it was very predominantly white. It was a very historical place. The Battle of Lexington and Concord. That's where the American Revolution started. It's genuinely a very wealthy town as well. And I was none of those things. I was none of those check marks. And growing up there, I think, I'm sure you guys have felt it as well, but there is just this sense of not feeling quite like them, like everyone else. And I think that dual identity where it's you go to school, you have this one persona, you go back home, you have another persona with your Asian parents or whatnot. And I think it's just a universal foreigner's experience, where people feel like they're not part of the majority, which makes sense because, that's just the way it works. And especially in a bubble like high school where it's just, there's so much toxicity and competition. It's just it's a breeding ground for all sorts of dramatic stories. And so,
True.
that was kind of like the grounds where I started, writing this short film called C, and it's, loosely based on my experiences and the experiences of my Korean American friend who's an adoptee. His name is C. That's where the title comes from. We were like pretty like one of a handful of Asian Americans in our school, and we never talked throughout like middle school and high school just because we didn't want to associate with each other. Like when you're like, the only few Asians, you're like, you don't want to taint your image. And so we never talked. And then I was writing the script and I was like kind of looking to my own identity, reflecting, and wait a second. I was like, oh, wait a second. I am Korean American. I'm like doing research. I'm like, there's this thing called the Korean American experience where people feel this internalized self-hatred against themselves and who they are and their culture and their parents. And I wrote about that experience. I talked to C, we got ice cream and we would just talk over the weekends, and I got to know him really well. And so he's a really good friend now. And I wrote this short film, and then we filmed it at the end of high school, senior year. Prior I'd done a stop motion short film called Treasure. It's spelled Trejur. I worked on that for about 3.5 years. It's like very Coraline-esque. And so it has like these live action eyes pasted on these puppets. That got into a few festivals and awards, and got about $13K in awards money from that. And then so that plus a Kickstarter plus some personal savings from working at a camera shop, put together about $20K, and then shot C at the end of high school. I had no connections to the film industry at all. Everyone on set was cold emailed, cold called. It was me and like some other random BU person that produced it. Just super run and gun, just like doing whatever we can to make it. And, we hired Ki Hong Lee, who's the star in Maze Runner. Yeah, it was just such a blessing. It like kind of just all fell together. And then, we did it. And it was my first time directing live action, and it found a home on HBO Max. And I just feel incredibly grateful and lucky to be able to, have these opportunities. And now we're developing that into a feature.
Yeah, and talk about developing into a feature. Like how does this process look like? And I know you've been one of the participants in the short to feature lab, right? Run by Jim Cummings. So how did this help with this process of developing the short into feature? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Last summer, I was in Korea filming another short film, which premiered at the SF Film Festival and won the top best short prize. And while I was filming there, I got a call from a random number, and it was like, yo, it's Jim. I'm like, Jim Cummings, like, because I submitted C like 2 years prior, right? And so like I thought I was rejected, whatnot, but they had a delay because of COVID, and so they just skipped a year, and so they're finally giving out all the calls. And Jim calls me. I'm like, oh my god, like I am a huge fan of Jim because I was like a fan since Thunder Road, like because he is the face of independent cinema. He is the coolest. And so I'm like, oh my god, it's so sick. While I'm in Korea, I'm like, that's awesome. And so basically in August, up from Korea, I fly back to LA, attend the lab, and it's just like really wonderful. It's I would describe the lab as just like a week and a half of just free time. It's like any sort of getaway where you can just kind of leave the worries of regular life behind. They have catered food that's so good. I don't know where they cater, but every meal was so good. And you just get to work on whatever you want, so some people would write their scripts. I edited the short film, and he would bring in people to like filmmakers, and they would pair us up with like legit mentors like Kogonada or some like crazy people, and bringing people like do workshops and just hang out and go to the beach, play badminton, and stuff like that. It was great. Just such a wonderful experience. And also, you have these lifelong friends, and many of them have gone on to do like really incredible things. There's Anna Baumgarten, a few other people who have gone on to make their shorts to features. Miles Warren just made a feature that premiered at TIFF this year, called Bruiser, which is incredible. So just a wonderful experience. And now Jim's kind of attached us EP for our feature, and we kind of did the WeFunder approach, right? The WeFunder approach, the crowd equity thing. Because when I was going into the lab, the thing I kept thinking about was like, oh, how do I get this movie made? I have an agent, and she's taking it out, and she's been wonderful. But statistically, think about it, like who is going to invest $1 million into a first time feature writer director
Yeah.
who's young when there's a million other sophomore, junior, feature filmmakers who are way more experienced than me, way more older than me, who want half the money for their for another movie. So it's like the odds are just impossible. I think are just very stacked against me. And so I was like, okay, how do I build momentum on this thing, right? And so I think Jim's lab came at the perfect time for me, where it was like, I'm the kind of person to just like go and get it, like if there's a way. I think the thing about the feature world that frustrated me was just how slow it is and how dependent you are on these financiers and these companies to tell you what's working or what's not working, yes or no, and so when Jim told me about the WeFunder method, I felt like I could regain control of my own narrative again, like suddenly I could put in my time and effort to make this thing happen, or at least build a momentum to. And so we launched a WeFunder in May, a couple months ago. We're at about 270,000 total. Like we have a couple investments outside of WeFunder, so 270 total. Talking with a couple of production companies in the U.S. and Korea. Basically, what I guess I'm trying to say is, once we launched in May, and it started like picking up momentum, and people saw that there was money in it, that there was backing in it, and everyone's getting FOMO, and everyone's now like, oh, I want in, So it's just it's Hollywood is just like psychology to a certain degree, where it's just like people, it's a lot of talk, right? So like people, you got to convince people, and it's all about persuasion to some degree. And some people are really good at it, I think if you can leverage that, I think it's great. There's so many talented artists out there. What differentiates people is, that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, where, you do the go get it, mentality, doing the WeFunder thing and literally cold emailing every single investor is not an easy task. It takes so much mental space. Like, I don't know if you've done a Kickstarter before, but you're just thinking about it constantly. If you've ever done stocks or crypto, it's like always on your mind. You can't stop thinking about money because it's so like, it's just toxic. But you do what you got to do, and you put the money together, and then now people, because our budget's like just under $1 million, and we're raising 350 on WeFunder. Now we have like leverage. Now these companies, are interested, and I think it's just a lot easier to move up the ladder and prove yourself and get the chance to make the film.
Makes sense. But like, did you have the script for Isle Child ready when you attended the short to feature lab?
Yeah, I did actually, because I was writing it during COVID, and so I did have a draft ready. It definitely needed a lot more editing and whatnot, but I chose to spend my time at the lab just editing the short film.
Yeah, so you basically had an idea how you're gonna like turn it into a feature length story earlier. Okay, and how are you approaching it? Because like Jim started his feature, right, Found the Road with like the remake of the scene that was the short film. How did you approach the whole thing?
I'm still learning as well, but I think one of my weaknesses as a screenwriter, I think, is like dialogue or things like that. My process is like, write the script from just feeling, because I think there has to be like an emotional flow, and when you write the vomit draft, like that flow comes out, and then as you're rewriting, you begin to understand the themes, begin to understand the story instead of going into the story with a predetermined idea about it. I just kind of let the story tell itself, and then using intuition, like all intuition. And then from there, obviously it's like revising, and it's about testing, right? So like I send it out to friends, like a first group of friends, they read it, give me feedback, and then it's just like testing to see what works. And then from there, with the dialogue and stuff like that, I think because I've always worked in a very low budget scale, something that's worked for me is like on set, as we're getting closer to production, I know what pieces I have, and so then I can begin to play. I can throw out everything. I do a ton of prep, and then I throw it all out, and then I just play on set. I think that's really fun, like improvising on set. Like, we have like, obviously like 2 hours, like we have 10 shots, like what are we gonna do? And then you edit it in your head, and then you like film only the shots you need, no coverage, never any coverage. And then I know it's the editor's worst nightmare, but no coverage, just get the shot, do a oneer, and then call it a day. And all of that is coming from feeling, it's always coming from, if it's a funeral scene, like maybe I want to cover that with just a close up of someone's hands, like scratching themselves, and I want the DP and the team to know that and like be fluid enough and have enough preparation to be able to get to that, be like, one, we don't have time. Two, we don't have money. Three, how do we make this more creative? And so instead of doing like a standard wide, closer, we'll just do a close up of her nails or something, and that will evoke so much more. And so I think that's my script to screen process.
Okay, cool. I also want to ask you about, like, we've watched Busan. Is it called Busan 1999, right?
Yep.
And I've noticed like there is like overlap between the short film and storyline of Isle Child, where basically there is like this homecoming aspect, right, to Korea. So is that on purpose?
Yeah, you did. You caught on. So basically, I one of the reasons I wanted to make Busan 1999 was because it was set in Korea, and about 15 to 20 pages of Isle Child, the feature film, is set in Korea. And so I really wanted to, like, it's all prep, right? So I wanted to know, what is it going to be like shooting in Korea?
Okay.
Like directing in Korean, the Korean film industry, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, naturally, I think similar themes of identity and that kind of stuff just like bled out. And especially that's because it's something that I'm thinking about in my life at this moment a lot right now. You coming from Massachusetts to LA where it's so diverse, I think identity is something that's on my plate a lot, but obviously, as time goes and I get older and stuff, I'm sure I'll have broader things to, touch on. But yeah, you're right. There is a connect there.
Yeah, so basically you're doing like a prep work before this big project coming up your way. That's awesome.
That's smart.
Yeah.
That's smart. I noticed because I watched Busan today and thought I was watching, I was like, oh, there's like a burlap texture filter over the entire film to give it that grit. And then I was also thinking that between C and Busan, water, close-ups of hands washing and stuff.
Yeah.
Those cover shots of like showing the texture, like the close-ups of the bathroom and then the hands and stuff like that. You're a man after my own heart. Those are like eye candy to me. I'm like, oh, this is the best ever. This is awesome.
Yeah, a couple of things to note about that. First off, the burlap texture. I was looking at some comparison or like, some reference shots when I was in prep, and I ran into this Japanese photographer named Rinko Kawauchi or something like that. She's an incredible photographer, and I found a PDF of her works, and some of her shots had this like filtration to it, which looked like the grid of a photo book. I found like a random stock image of like cloth and just like keyed it out and then put that over it. I wish it was a finer texture. I wish it was like finer, but because on the big screen, like it really shows, it's a little too much. But I wanted to break up the image. And I think it's so fun, like playing with what image should feel like. And I kind of wanted to give it that like distance, and then one of the reasons why people put grain, not only for the texture, is I think just to like separate the image and make it feel a little bit more distant. Because when you distance the image, sometimes it feels closer for some reason. I don't know. There's just a psychological thing about that. I think it just feels a little bit more intimate. It feels more non-intrusive, and so you're able to connect with it more. I saw a great post about Lady Bird and how they also took the Alexa grain and put that on top to give it that that extra layer, which makes it feel not so immersive. It feels like you're kind of at an arm's distance, and that allows you to just kind of watch the story as if it's like a fable. Yeah, when it's not so similar to your life, I feel like then you are able to, I don't know, something about it just feels more warm and like it feels like more inviting, in my opinion. And then another thing you mentioned, those like close-up shots and stuff. Something that I want to note is that film was shot in 1.5 days, the whole thing, and so. Wow. A lot of those choices, again, are coming from a lack of money and time. We have like an hour left and we got to get all of this. How are we going to cover this, So then you get really creative and you're editing in your head and you're not getting any coverage. And it's very stressful. But, I think that's more interesting in my opinion. Yeah.
I think that kind of speaks to how good of a director that you're going to be, where even in the edit, like all of that looks deliberate. You know what I mean? Like you couldn't see it and be like, well, it's obvious they didn't have enough coverage. And so they were forced to do this stuff. And that I think really speaks to how well you were able to like throw that together and be like, okay, this is it goes along with the story so well. Kudos to you for that, because it came out awesome.
Also, I think my background as a stop motion animator, like, obviously in stop motion animation, you're going frame by frame. And so you have a really good at understanding timing, I think, of like, what are the beats and like when do we need to cut? Obviously, you guys are editors, so you guys know this way better than I do. But I think just timing wise, like, this should be exactly like, I don't know, like, just the timing, I think is just kind of ingrained in me. And so I was able to storyboard it in my head and edit it in my head as we're going, as we're filming, as we're changing things, which I hopefully made it feel like it was all deliberate, and nothing felt, awkward. Because I think every shot needs, like, you guys probably know this, but every shot needs that flow. Like this shot, there's just something about a shot that fits into another shot, and it's just all intuition, I think.
It goes back to like you were saying about that gut feeling, like as editors, we're watching the pacing and the timing, and it's all by feel. It's not like instructions like, okay, this is going to be 3 minutes, and it may work out to be 3 minutes, but it's also like, I'm editing it this way because this is how it feels right. In my mind, this is how it feels right. Or watching it, this is where it should cut. That intuition and that gut feeling, it's a real thing. It's totally a real thing.
I've read on your website that Isle Child got reviewed by the producer of Moonlight, 12 Years a Slave. First of all, how did it happen? Secondly, like, how did it like influence the script? Did you make any changes to it afterwards?
Oh yeah, if Didi Gardner gives you notes, you take them. No, basically it was through this another fellowship called Diverso. Diverso is like the organization, it's a nonprofit, and they have a program called Minority Report for young screenwriters. So I submitted. I was chosen as a fellow, and then the top scripts get chosen to read by the jury board. Only one or two get chosen for each jury board member, and one of the board members, the top board member, was Didi Gardner from Plan B. Yeah, Didi and Darrell Britt Gibson, I think. He's an actor. He also read it. And then, they gave me notes. And this was like one of the first early, like version 4 or 5 drafts, like very early draft. And so, I mean, that I still have that on my, computer desktop. It's like so cool to receive. Obviously she, loved the script. She gave me notes on how sometimes like the symbolism could be a little bit too much. And so I toned that down. And then developing the mother character, some notes on that. What I loved about her notes was she was so filmmaker oriented, and so all of her notes was unlike any other notes I've ever gotten. And what I mean by that is like she understands the filmmaker's vision and is adapting her notes around that. You know what I mean? It's not like her vision. She's not injecting her vision into it and then giving you notes. She understands the filmmaker's vision and then is giving ways to supplement that, if that makes sense. I just thought that was a really uncommon and interesting and difficult on her part.
So kind of going back to Jim Cummings as an executive producer, what's his influence on you?
Yeah, I mean, I really accredit a lot to him. He's given me all the tools I need to be able to do it myself without having to rely on the gatekeepers, I suppose. Right now, he's an executive producer. He's also like, he's just like a mentor and like just a friend, to be honest. He's like an uncle figure, he's just like always there. Like, every few days I'll just be like, yo, I have a question on this. And so we'll just call for a second. I don't know how else to describe it. He's just like
Jim is always helpful.
Yeah.
I liked when he was doing like these Twitter spaces, right? Where he was like talking for 2 hours, like answering questions, like from every facet of filmmaking world.
He is so philanthropic with his time and his resources and his knowledge, because I feel like in Hollywood, there a lot of people want to gatekeep their information, and they want to there's this what's the word, the scarcity mentality, and so people are like, oh, if I share my knowledge or share my wealth or my whatever, my social media presence, like I won't get to the top, like there's that mentality. But Jim has this abundance mentality, I think, and so he's always willing to share his time, willing to share his information, his knowledge about anything. I called Jim in 2017, I think, when I was working on the stop motion short film. His buddy Danny Madden, who made a feature film
Oh yeah.
called Beast. Danny and I are close, but yeah, I called Jim with the stop motion. He was like connected with me with Danny because Danny's also an animator. So we actually called back then, but then it came full circle because like what 3 or 4 years later, I'm at the lab and I'm like, oh my god, he's genuinely like really really awesome. How'd you run into Jim? Like, how'd you find his WeFunder campaign?
I've been following him since Thunder Road short film. I mean, then of course feature as well. But it started with the short film for me. Like I love the story. It was very, at least I took it very personally. Like I just love the stuff he does. Like the minutes, all six are amazing, great. I love watching them.
Yeah, so good.
Once I saw that he's working on the third one and that he's going to use WeFunder, I was like into it right away. And I am a very minor investor, but at the same time, I just knew I want to be part of it, even if it would be like a Patreon basically an initiative where he's just getting money to do it. I would still put money there because I think the stuff that he does for the filmmaking community just like begs to be paid back by goodwill of the people around.
Yeah, no, I love how he is so community oriented too. The reason why he made the Shorts to Feature Lab was he saw that there was this lack of, this space, this open
Yeah.
space in the film industry where like people weren't putting the ladder back down.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like people at the top, they would
Yeah.
get over the castle walls and like live in the castle, right? But there was nobody who would bring the ladder down for the other people. Yeah, I also want to shout out his his team. He has his producer Ben Weissner, who's also part of the lab, and he's put in an incredible amount of work. For Jim, for us, for everyone. He's also just such a similarly just like the most humble, like he's like such a dad figure. I don't know. He's so cool.
I like that idea of the how you said the sharing of abundance, and it made me think of like there's that other phrase where the high tide lifts all boats, and so why wouldn't you want that? Getting everybody to like make cool shit, you're just gonna get more cool shit. So why wouldn't you cultivate that and make that a standard?
And I think, the WeFunder just fits perfectly into that, where it's all about building a community. It's all about building a community of film lovers and movie lovers and people who are, want to invest in your vision and, they haven't read the script, but to be honest, I think a lot of Hollywood also like, nobody really knows how to read these days. It's all about like it's all about the pitch materials. It's about the way you present yourself. Your old films, it's about the proof of concept. Nobody has the attention span these days, and so everyone's believing in you as a person and your vision. So,
what are the challenges for you when editing? What are the biggest challenges for you, and how do you plan to approach editing of Isle Child?
Well, I have edited all my shorts so far. And that's because I didn't have the money to get an actual editor. And so with the feature, obviously, I'd outsource that. So to be honest, I'm learning. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure out what a relationship with an editor would look like because I haven't had experience with that, because I come in with a very specific vision, when I'm going to the production, like, obviously day one, production is just like, I think fighting. You walk in and you've already lost the game. You've already lost the match. You're just trying to fight back to keep whatever, like someone's stealing your treasure, raccoons are stealing your treasure. And you're just like, from the moment day begins, you're just trying to claim whatever you can, like little last scraps. You're trying to like make it work. It's like just trying to not let it all fall apart, just letting a little bit fall apart. When I go into production, I have a very, very specific plan of everything. Like I know exactly like, what kind of Foley and sound is going to go in, how it's going to be cut together, the color, what it's going to look like, every shot, like moving elements. Obviously, you get to the edit, it's not how it's going to work out, and you like adjust from there. But I'm very curious what that relationship would look like with an editor who is better at editing than me and I think that'll just take some time figuring out. Like maybe, they do the first pass or I do the first pass, or, and then kind of coming back together and then collaborating. I think I love collaboration. I think everyone is smarter than me. I think, again, like it's the master of all, jack of all, master of none kind of things. So I always want to learn from people and always want to find people who are smarter than me and better than me, because I think that's how collaboration should work. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what that would look like with a feature. And again, with like editing, because I'm not like first and foremost an editor, with all my previous shorts, when I would edit it and then I'll send it off to a friend who I know is good at editing, and they'll take a look and then give me notes, just like the screenwriting process. So that's all. That's the extent of my experience so far with editing. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Iterative process. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, Thomas, do you have like any actionable tips for filmmakers that they can like implement to make better movies?
Yeah, I think something that's always helped me was kind of putting all my eggs in one basket. And what I mean by that is, I think the structure of film school and like the filmmaking process, like it's quantity over quality, right? And yeah, that works. I think that's great. Like it works for some people. Things that's worked for me is putting all my eggs into one basket, and then taking a very big jump from there. So my first short film was like the stop motion thing. I did a Kickstarter for that, raised about $7,000, and then shot that for 3.5 years, right? That got me into a certain level, like a certain range of filmmaking, then jump from there to a 20K live action short film. And like live action was always somewhere that I wanted to go. It's just I didn't have the resources, the people, the connections to do so, being like a freshman in high school. But yeah, jumping from there to another short film, you know what I mean? And then to a feature, like jumping as high as I can each time, because I put everything into my last short film, maybe this isn't the most wise, but like I'll dump all of my savings, all of my everything, like as if this is the last thing I'm going to make, right? Doing it like that. And then I'm able to, because the product is, hopefully better than if I hadn't put everything into it, then the better product leads to a better result, if that makes sense. So like with all of my shorts, I've been able to recoup a lot of the funds, maybe because, like I put everything into it and that money just like pays off. You're investing, right? Investing into it. So into your future. And so something that's worked for me is like doing that, putting all my eggs in one basket. I think proof of concepts are the way to go now. Like with any sort of IP or material these days, it's always based on IP. So it's always based on either a book, an article, or nowadays you need a short film, like a proof of concept short film. So I think that is incredibly useful. Instead of having like a director sample short film, just make a proof of concept for your feature or your TV show. I think that's really valuable. And just lastly, just reach for the stars. It kind of ties into the first point of just putting everything into it, go as big as you can. People are kind, most of them, they'll say yes, like big actors, they'll want to star in your thing. Once you have a big actor, then the money comes in, or like other people want to come in, and then like now you have this thing that's become bigger, and now you have a big project, and then you do your best, you put everything into it, and then cross your fingers and hope the stars will align, and then
that's amazing.
Do it again.
That's great. That's great. What do you want to end with? Like, do you want to invite people to your WeFunder campaign? Like, it's your pitch time, so whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess if you want to be part of the WeFunder, I think that'd be a wonderful place to start or look into. I think that'll have all of the information about our feature film, me, our team, Jim, and everything. And also, if you have the extra funds, like you wouldn't hurt to invest. And how that works is basically you invest, and now you're an investor in this film. Like think of any tech startup. Think of investing in stock. Once the film makes money, all of it will, go to the investors until they make back 125% of their initial investment. And then on top of that, they'll get 30% equity. So 30% net equity that the film makes after the investors recoup their 125%. Goes to the investors, split based on their share size, right? So basically, long story short, if you believe in the project, if you believe in us, I think we have an incredible team. I think not only are producers very, very talented and like have worked with, with A24, these are huge companies, but also, we have Jim. He has like his own distribution method. We're pretty confident that we can get this thing sold. Obviously, fingers crossed. And, festivals. But we sell the film and then we make the money and then give it back to our investors, and in the process, build a community around it. So yeah. But if you don't have money, it's okay. Like, don't even worry about it.
Thomas, I think you're well on your way of building that community and all that stuff. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, such a wonderful conversation. I think what I like most of what he said is the scarcity versus abundance mindset.
Oh yeah.
As a kid, I think I was like, sometimes I was afraid of like, I want to be the best in class in that subject. So maybe I shouldn't share that I read like the book about it or something like that. And it's even like, I'm a little bit ashamed even to say it, but it's definitely something that I realized. Fortunately, early on, that it's a bad idea and that it always backfires. And like the best idea and the best way to learn something and to accelerate something is actually to share what you learn. The sharing what you learn and like teaching others is the best way to actually accelerate yourself even more.
I would agree with that. Definitely, like learning and trying stuff and just doing it. Because I think that's a big thing of like with Thomas is that he just loved filmmaking and just, didn't wait for anybody to be like, okay, you can now take this camera and make a film. He just decided to do it. And, it's paying off. I mean, even if he wasn't, winning awards and stuff like that, him just doing it is a win in itself. And, sharing that knowledge with other people so that they can be inspired is always a plus in my book. So yeah, kudos to Thomas for sure.
Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to us and to taking time out of your busy day. As always, we want your messages on SpeakPipe. So be so good. Visit that link in the description and record us a message. We want to hear your voice. We do. We really do.
Also, don't forget we have the email to send it to, as well as if you want to follow us on Instagram @CutToReveal is the handle. And thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, we want to hear from you. And thanks again. So I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day.
If you like what you've heard, please rate, review, or subscribe on whatever platform you've listened to this on.
Your reviews help other editors to discover the show, and tell your friends.
Also, if you have any questions or comments, leave us a message at SpeakPipe. There's a link in the description, or email us at podcast@cuttothepoint.com.